Mike Weiner, and I'm one of the founders of ElectroHealing Holdings, and we're trying to do something right that people have been trying to do for many years, and most haven't succeeded, just one or two. Medtronic succeeded. Guidance St. Jude, they all succeeded. And most of the others, and you probably know many yourself, have not succeeded. So what I'm talking about is, today we got a huge industry, we're all familiar with it, that makes pills. Pharmaceuticals, chemicals, call it what you will. And they got a lot of problems, which everyone's familiar with. Then there's this area that's been considered hocus pocus or bunk, where various electromagnetics might do something. People claim it does this or that, and it's medically wonderful. And most of those people are considered charlatans or idiots. Even the ones who have something that works, by the way. Because the Russians started with millimeter wave technology in their military and then went to their space program. Same thing happened with us. Oz died in our space program, even though it worked for bone loss. And the Russians made devices all over the former Soviet bloc. They're still there and they work. Now, most physicians I know and academics here in the United States say they don't work. Oh. And they say something along the line, oh, everybody knows. They say something like, everybody knows they don't work. But there was a wealthy guy in Philadelphia on the board of the trustees of Temple. And he had all these relatives in Eastern Europe, and they said, no, it works. He said, no, everybody hears. So he put his money where his mouth is. He put a lot of money in, and they started a research in 1992, most people never heard of. And they, for 15 years, they started Russian millimeter wave technology. And the last paper they published, about 2006, said, well, they tested 9 things, and they work great. Nobody's even paid attention. It's not on the market. What's happening now, there's a couple of reasons why it's not on the market. The patents, and Russians patented everything in Russia. They didn't patent in the United States before the Soviet Union collapsed. So prior art was a killer, and there's no IP. I went and looked myself. I didn't see anything. I heard some great stories, nothing to get me excited. Now I'm about to tell you something that I think is very exciting, and hopefully you've heard it here first. So I don't know how to work this. Are you doing it for me? Did I just say next slide? I'd like to go past the one that I just got rid of. That next one, please.
Click the one on the right.
One on the right, that's what I pushed. That one, right?
Pointed like straight this way.
Oh, there? There?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. 2 people have told me within the last 6 months, very similar but worded differently. Arthur Moss, I'll tell you who he is in a minute. He said post-electromagnetic fields, often called PEMF by the scientists, represent the next revolution in medicine. Now this is no flake. This guy has been around cardio for a long time. He put the second Medtronic pacemaker in, and he wrote the study you probably heard about 10 years ago called MATIT study that said if you have an implantable ICD in your chest, implantable cardiac defibrillator, you have a 35% better chance of surviving your next heart attack, and there's no drug that can do that for you. And that shot the sales of ICDs through the roof. And he was revered as a scientist and physician, but he's now revered as a moneymaker. So he has a lot of business, clinical business from places like Medtronic and Boston Scientific. The other guy is the guy at DARPA who in 1992 said robotics is the next big thing in medicine. He funded robotics. It wound up to be the Da Vinci robot, among other things. He says the same thing. He calls it directed energy. Now that scares me as a term. But it's all the same thing. It turns out, look, the pacemaker is a simple transistor circuit that puts 3 volts to your heart and causes all the heart muscles to contract together. It fixes bradycardia, tachycardia, things like that. And the ICD will give you an 800-volt charge if your heart stops and is arrested. Now, pacemakers don't even listen for heart attacks. If you have a heart attack and you drop down dead, the pacemaker is going to keep on pacing. If it happens to pace right in the muscle that's infarcted, you may die from fibrillation. But they don't put that in the brochure. It's not that. I don't really want you to know that. So here's a couple of problems that we're trying to solve. There's nothing good on the market for dementia or Alzheimer's that I know of There's a huge vulnerable population. There's nothing good to replace chemo and radiation if you have cancer, and although the statistics are munged all over the place, it's about 33% of the people get remission, and the rest of them really suffer. Everybody suffers, but 33% really get better. Maybe it's better than that. Maybe my numbers are wrong. It's not great. Chemo and radiation should be outlawed under the Constitution as cruel and inhuman punishment until we have something better, because it's a pretty lousy way to treat a person. But we don't have anything better, but we could. And there's not much for atrial fibrillation, and it's a ablation, which weakens your heart, and you may get congestive heart failure. And this thing about 35% success rate, I was just telling you about, it's a $25,000 device. The pacemaker is a $5,000 device. It's almost the same device it was in 1980. It's a cash cow. There's no incentive for the pacemaker companies to give you a better pacemaker, but I can tell you they got a dozen much better ones that will make you live longer. They don't necessarily want to spend the money to put it through FDA because they're a business. They're a financial business. They're not a life-saving business. If you think that, you're wrong. So they don't come out with the pacemakers, like the pacemaker I invented to use low voltage fibrillation, so every pacemaker could save maybe 20% of the people instead of 35%. I got a patent on that in 2006 based on research done in the 1990s. Can't get any money to go do that. I tried. That's not a problem, is it? Who suffers? I suffer. I'm an entrepreneur. So what? Entrepreneurs are supposed to suffer. Medtronic would probably get a lower earnings per share if they were innovative. The problem is there's no incentive in this country for innovation except some poor soul who thinks he's got the next huge breakthrough. He better have a damn good banker, really good patent attorney, and get some really good investors, because most of them don't. That's where they fail. So we don't have the innovation. I tell you when you really care about this. You care about this when someone beloved, including yourself, gets cancer or dementia or atrial fibrillation. Too late. So what could we do here? So I just explained this. These people don't really want to innovate. The government does, but the government doesn't. If you heard me here this morning, we don't have the systems to commercialize the innovation. They're dysfunctional. Yeah, some people make money. Yeah, Kleiner Perkins was doing good for a while. But we don't have a good system, because the system works the bell curve where the maximum ROI is, not where the maximum loss of human suffering is, not where the maximum loss of families going to hell is. And I'm not one of them do-gooders. I just think if we could work the system, we could all make more money doing more good. So that's, here's the problem. If a radical innovation came about, I'm going to imply a few, but I'm not going to tell you exactly what we're doing, because we don't want to get everybody working on this. If a really promising innovation came about, wouldn't one of the large companies or venture capitalists go after it? Absolutely not. 1 out of 20. I look at them all the time. They have their little, what they call a sweet spot. Most of these early stage things, and who the hell knows, and where's your evidence? In other words, if it's ready to go, I might take a meeting, but I probably won't give you the money anyway. That's really my assessment of where it's at. So the answer is maybe yes, maybe no. And VCs want to invest in what they can sell to the Bostons or the Medtronics, and remember, they're not looking for radical innovation. They're not. You get a good drug-eluting stent, you don't necessarily want another one. $100 million. So we need more competition. We need more innovation. We want to be the one who does it, because we know how to sell to these big companies. My team and I have done it before. Now, Wilson Greatbatch invented the pacemaker. He was an electrical engineer putting electrodes on a sheep farm in Utica, New York, when he got the idea for the pacemaker right at the time that the first transistors that were low voltage came about. And he quit his job and he made 50 pacemakers. And before he did that, he went to cardiologist and said, "Look what I got." And his first 4, he threw him out of their office. Said, "You're crazy, get out." And he was persistent. The 5th one was a Dr. Shardock, died a very wealthy man recently. They made the first Shardock great batch pacemaker. They didn't know how to sell it. They went to Minneapolis where this guy, Earl Backen, was selling temporary pacemakers, and they convinced him to license it. He had no money, negative balance sheet, and that was Medtronic. That's where it started. You go back to all these companies, it's amazing how they started. I mean, there's probably a bunch of them in that room, hopefully. So the great breakthroughs don't get funded. They're not going to get funded. Maybe I'll get funded, but I got a hell of a story. Because I think we represent, and we're holding ElectroHealing. I've been 3 years not telling anybody what we're doing. Privately funded, a couple of partners, bunch of volunteers. I'll tell you who they are. The first two revolutions were minimally invasive surgery, and they were robotics. The next one is a combination of these therapies for all kinds of serious problems. I'll give you a sense. I think we covered that. Here's some of the indications we think we can address. Tinnitus, dementia, including Alzheimer's, ready for FDA, depression, traumatic brain injury, and other cognitive disorders. At the University of Rochester, they discovered that the people who had left ventricle assist devices, heart pumps, were getting incredibly better indicators for their diabetes and insulin. Makes no sense. Pumping doesn't help insulin. Well, they brought in some experts. They discovered that the induction coupling device that powers the heart pump is right over the pancreas, the way they install them. And then they realized that those electromagnetic waves in that induction coupling were stimulating the mitochondria to produce more ATP. So they filed a bunch of patents on that. They're doing some very sophisticated studies. Better, I think, explanation than that energy, which you can put in a pacemaker. It's not a lot of voltage. Put that energy into the heart, and your heart muscles will have more energy and contract better, and you might not get congestive heart failure as fast. You think people are rushing to give their money? No. But we are. We're starting on that, and we've already done improvement patents. Now that might be 2, 3, 4, 5 years out, but that's huge. So what we're working on right now are very broad patents. Good studies, just the kind of thing that we know. If I go into Medtronic, and I know them, I've sold them things. Most people don't know how to do that. I go in and I show them certain data. That's not they have their own bell curve. If I show them something that says, if you don't give me a deal today and I go to St. Jude, you could be in huge trouble. But you're my friends, I came here first. They might buy it. We hope so. So we've got a team of experienced people, and we also developed the FDA and the business plans. We don't try and fund the FDA if we can help it, unless it's cheap, because if it's a pacemaker improvement, we can't go to FDA. It has to be the company who we license. It can't be us. So we invented the solution for making pacemakers safe with MRI. We licensed it to Boston Scientific as part of a deal where they could also image stents non-invasively and see restenosis and clotting. And then we went and sold the patent portfolio to Medtronic, including the license from Boston. And so Medtronic, 5 years later, shipped the first MRI-safe pacemaker, and they have in a flat market, they have a very nice increase in share and margin. So we hope if we go back with something else, we can sell it to them. So Stu McDonald was a VP of R&D instrumentation at J&J, and he did a bunch of other very cool things, including a collaboration we did with the FDA when we wanted to go into MRI safety to establish the metrics you should measure to determine safety. It was all over the map before that. And about a year after doing that, we sold the technology to Medtronic. Rick Satava is the guy that funded Intuitive. Michael Manning holds the original patents for pulse electromagnetic fields 1972 that basically created the wound healing business, and he worked on the millimeter wave technology at Temple for 10 years. He's got some great ideas for how to take normal cells, including cardio cells, and get them to reverse to adult stem cells. It's actually in literature if you look. But we filed patents on putting in a pacemaker. I think it's a good idea. And then there's me. I'm a salesman, and I like technology. I'm also an amateur patent enthusiast. And then there's Warren. Warren redid Blue Cross Blue Shield of the Carolinas, their IT and all. He's a very sharp guy, good at operations, knows software. So the business model is pretty simple. We're going to try and roll up all this stuff everybody's poo-pooing and doesn't believe in, and then show some evidence so people suddenly take it seriously. And the press had an article recently about Glaxo investing 50 million in bioelectrics. It was in the New York Times in the article 2 months ago, Hacking the Brain. And DARPA's coming out with a funded program called ElectroRx. That's going to change it. And then the fact that this guy Moss says, we can cure diabetes, this stuff is great. The pacemakers can do much more. And Medtronic is probably saying, oh shit, we don't, oh man, pacemaker margins are going to go from 90 to 50, damn. I'm telling you, that's how they think. That's, if I were a shareholder, I don't know what I'd think. So that's what we're going to do. How can you participate? If there's anybody in the room who's a private investor or a foundation or a family investor, we'd love to tell you more if you're interested. If you're a venture capital investor, we'd love to tell you more if you're friendly. we don't, and these are the people you call. Any questions? I actually have 2 minutes, and I'm gonna sit down until you ask me a question. Otherwise, I'll just volunteer something else. What would you like me to tell you more about?
Can you talk a little bit about the application in wound healing?
Yes. So in wound healing, they discovered orthopedic surgeon named Robert Becker, an MD at Syracuse, discovered it first while he was trying to invent regenerative medicine. And he discovered that this was electrical wire started to cause untreatable wounds to go to closure. And he had one theory, and he did some research, but then it got picked up by this fellow Manning when he went to Columbia Presbyterian and worked with Arthur Pilla and Andrew Bassett, both MDs. They created a company called EBS and started to sell this equipment. I don't follow the market, but it's a pretty good market, and it's used all over the world, and people know it works, and there are various models and various ways that it works.